North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Great. What is that? Well, the Wells Report is the news, honestly reported, honestly analyzed for both fact and bias. There is commentary that's not news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And then there's debate. And you're welcome to join us for that debate on our chat room at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and, oh, by the way, Rumble. But the Rumble broadcast comes after we do the show live, Central Time, from 2 until 5 p.m. every afternoon, well, Monday through Friday. Okay? So that being said, this is the Wells Report, and welcome. Good to have you here. By the way, another way to get in touch with us is our telephone number, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. So by all means, join us. Okay, so yesterday I was talking about Iran. I led the Wells Report's first hour with it. And it's not because I'm clairvoyant. It's just that I've been paying really close attention to that country. And I was talking about their decision to go ahead and start shipping short-range ballistic missiles to Russia. They've been sending drones, armed drones, for a while. And now they're planning on sending short-range ballistic missiles. I mentioned that Russia is very, very good at doing big things. Not necessarily very good at doing small things. And if indeed you're planning on using a small tactical nuclear warhead, which, by the way, the generals in the Kremlin are talking about, then you need a smaller booster to do that. But it does have to be a ballistic missile. In other words, it has to leave the atmosphere and then come down. All right? You can't launch... Russia cannot launch a ballistic missile of any kind without putting everybody at DEFCON 3 and probably DEFCON 2. You just can't do it. They just can't do that. But these smaller missiles, well, there's ambiguity. Are they carrying nuclear warheads or are they not carrying nuclear warheads? And very likely, if they did carry a nuclear warhead, how long would it be before we realize that that was the case? It would be at least a day or two. And so that being said, we reported that story as a story of importance. Well, here's another one. This one came out today from the Wall Street Journal. Saudi Arabia has shared intelligence with the U.S. that warns of an imminent attack from Iran on targets in the kingdom, putting the American military and others in the Middle East on an elevated alert level, this according to Saudi and U.S. officials. In response to the warning, Saudi Arabia, the U.S., and several other neighboring states have raised the level of alert for their military forces. They did not provide more detail on that Saudi intelligence. Saudi officials said that Iran is poised to carry out attacks on both the kingdom and Erbil, Iraq, in an effort to distract attention from domestic protests that have roiled the country since September. The White House National Security Council said it was concerned about the warnings and are ready to respond if Iran carries out an attack. Quote, "We are concerned about the threat picture. We remain in constant contact through military and intelligence channels with the Saudis," unquote. The spokesperson from the National Security Council goes on, "We will not hesitate to act in the defense of our interests and partners in the region." Iran has already attacked northern Iraq with dozens of ballistic missiles and armed drones since late September, one of which was shot down by a U.S. warplane as it headed toward the city of Erbil. That's where American troops are. Tehran publicly claimed that it has publicly claimed what it calls Iranian Kurdish separatist groups based there for fomenting unrest at home. Iranian authorities have also publicly accused Saudi Arabia, along with the U.S. and Israel, of instigating demonstrations in their country. Last month, the commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps publicly warned Saudi Arabia to rein in coverage of the protests in Iran by Farsi language satellite news channels, including Iran International, a Saudi backed satellite television channel based in London, popular with many Iranians. Quote, "This is our last warning because you are interfering in our internal affairs through these media," unquote. This according to Major General Hossein Salami, in remarks reported in state media at military drills in Iran's eastern Azerbaijan province. Quote, "You are involved in this matter. We know you are vulnerable," unquote. Iran's state news agency, IRNA, called Iran International a network formed by Saudi Arabia in 2017 in London that, quote, adopts a completely anti-Iran approach, unquote. I guess that's sort of like CNN with the United States. Anyway, authorities have struggled to quell the unrest that occurred almost daily since the death on September 16th of a young woman in police custody for allegedly violating Iran's strict rules on how women dress in public. More than 200 have been killed, over 1,000 arrested in the government's response to demonstrations that began as a defiant call for women's rights and have transformed into a movement demanding the downfall of the Islamic Republic. As the unrest spread, Iranian officials have blamed Iran's foes for inciting the unrest. Such unsupported claims are a familiar tactic for the regime, which has blamed Iran's adversaries during previous domestic protests against the regime. So indeed, there's trouble in Iran, and they're looking to export that trouble to their neighbors. And this brings me to a point that I brought up years ago. When the United States went into Iraq, and then we went into Afghanistan, we made a huge mistake in both places. We left. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not someone who believes in endless war. But as I recall, following World War II in Japan and in Germany, the war was over. And United States military, there was a United States military presence in both nations for 2 generations, 60 years. What I said at the time when we left Iraq was, I said we're making a giant mistake. That President Obama's move to remove troops from Iraq guaranteed we were going to have to go back there someday. Same story with Afghanistan. Afghanistan has long been the graveyard of empires. Afghanistan is at a very strange place in the human existence. It has always been a pustule on the complexion of the entire earth. And people keep going in there hoping to do something about it and never have. And we had a chance to go in there and do something about it. And we, like every other empire that walked in there, not that we're an empire, but you get the drift. We essentially just wiped our hands clear and walked away. Same story in Iraq. I said at the time we should have made Iraq the nation's 51st state. We should have made it a territory of the United States of America. And why didn't we? Why didn't we? We had just completely destroyed the government of Iraq, like we completely destroyed the government of Germany, like we completely destroyed the government of Japan. Why didn't we stay there? I'll tell you why. Because we don't want to solve the problem of the Middle East. Had the United States of America done what we did in Germany, which was stay there and form NATO, etc., 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 if we had stayed in Iraq and formed a NATO-style alliance, including Israel, Iran would not be a player in that region. There would not be an Iranian nuclear weapons program. There would not be a possible fuse for World War III that's lit and burning as we speak. But we didn't do that, did we? You know what's really interesting to me? What's really interesting to me is that both in Japan and in Germany, we didn't hear an awful lot of people say Americans go home in either of those countries. Why was that? That was because what we were doing was helping those nations completely remake themselves. We were there for 2 generations. That means we had access to a couple of generations of school children. We didn't teach them about America. We taught them about Germany. We taught them about Japan. We didn't have to impose Americanism on Iraq. What we should have done was impose peaceful, reasonable Iraqism on Iraq. In other words, force those people to take yes for an answer. Back up their reasonable government. Have American military personnel in there that were available at a moment's notice to respond to a problem in the Middle East. And we should have stayed there until things cooled off. By the way, in case you're wondering, now we're sitting here that intelligence from Saudi Arabia says the attack could come in the next 48 hours. The last thing that happened in the Middle East that was good happened during the Trump administration when Jordan and a few other countries decided to align with Israel for formal diplomatic ties. Over flights of airplanes, direct flights from Israel to those other places. And now we find ourselves on the brink of war in that same region. Again. Yesterday, we were talking about whether or not this leftist political bent of the Democrat Party indicated insanity. And I mentioned a famous quote by Albert Einstein, who said, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result, it's because you're insane. How many times are we going to go into the Middle East, clean the mess up, then leave and wait for the mess to refire itself? How many times are we going to do that? You know, I realize that what I'm discussing is American hegemony. Pax Americana. But it sure as hell beats the alternative, doesn't it? It sure as hell beats the alternative. And by the way, for the presence of the United States, you know, we take a stipend in, petroleum. You're listening to the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. I want to make something abundantly clear. Okay? 817, let's see, 817, 819, yeah, 817-379-2172. That's it. Yeah. Just double checking. I want to make something clear. When I'm talking about a presence in Iraq, creating a U.S. territory there. I'm not talking about fighting a constant war there. I'm talking about ending the war there. Ending all warfare there. Making the entire state of Iraq a green zone. It's not impossible. It's not impossible at all. And so what I'm saying is, in other words, it's one thing to have troops stationed someplace for a strategic purpose. It's another to have troops stationed someplace to fight a war. The war in Iraq was over. And frankly, we had an opportunity to stay there. And we blew it. And that, by the way, that was a part of bipartisan decision making. You see, as far as I'm concerned, the cost that we're about to pay because we left too soon, again, far outweighs the cost of not leaving too soon. You know, it's really interesting. I watched a movie called Charlie Wilson's War. And it was about the United States clandestine interference, shall we say, with the Russian occupation of Afghanistan before we decided to go in and occupy Afghanistan. And in that movie, there's a scene where Charlie Wilson, played by Tom Hanks, said that's what we always do. We see a problem, we go someplace and we change the world. And then we leave. But the ball keeps on bouncing. It just keeps on bouncing. How many times are we going to make this same mistake? We made the same mistake twice in the same region in a matter of 3 years. We fought 2 wars there. And then we left again. I understand bring the boys home. I get it. I absolutely understand it. I do. But there comes a time where you're throwing bad money after good. And that's what we're about to do. If Iran attacks Saudi Arabia, one, it would be stupid because that would absolutely seal the deal on any kind of support whatsoever for reinvigorating the Iran nuclear weapons deal, which is probably what they want to do anyway, because now the whole thing was a bad idea. One of the problems with making a treaty with duplicitous people is that the treaty doesn't mean anything. Donald Trump did the right thing to get out of it. Why? Because it was meaningless. I mean, all that was going to happen was we're going to be able to say, oh, yeah, we caught them breaking the treaty. They were going to break the treaty anyway. All we did was actually perpetuate their nuclear weapons program. And so maybe what they're trying to do is twofold. One, scare the liver out of Saudi Arabia. And two, end the Biden administration fantasy about going back in there and trying to reinvigorate a bad deal in the first place. They want to be left alone so they can make their nuclear weapons, so they can threaten Israel with them. Once. I wonder what we're going to do with the landmass that used to be Iran when the Israelis are done with them. I don't know. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. I respectfully ask that you support this show. Please do. You can do it a lot of different ways. By the way, someone, Chad, just said, hey, thanks for your daily show. It is so helpful. That's what we're trying to do. I'm just trying to give you the news. Just trying to give you something that isn't propagandized to the point of incomprehensibility. That's what we do here. You know, I don't have, strangely, and it depends on who you ask about this broadcast. This is not a partisan broadcast. I mean, unless you consider the United States Constitution being a partisan object. I don't. I believe the Constitution belongs to all of us. Everybody. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, all of us. Well, not progressives because they hate it. Okay, that's fine. That's because they're totalitarians and want to run everything. Well, by all means, leave us in peace. That being said, the divisions in this country can be solved by focusing on the greatest political documents ever created. If there's a bias on that on this broadcast, that's where it is. And if you keep finding me being extremely critical of, say, for example, a political party, it's probably because they don't give a damn about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence that defined this nation. In fact, those people very likely consider those documents to be the enemy. And so when I'm stomping on a particular political party, it's not because I'm enamored with the other one. It's because they're un-American. And if, by the way, you happen to be a mover and a shaker in that particular political party that I'm talking about, and you want to debate whether or not you're American or not, then just give me a call. I'll show up anywhere, anytime, any place. But you won't. And I know you won't. Because you can't afford somebody taking you out in public. It's not because I'm some wizard of American politics. It's because I'm an American. And I can read. I've done the work to explain what the Constitution is. It's called the Federalist, mistakenly called the Federalist Papers, but okay, whatever. I've actually read those things. I've read the Bill of Rights. I've read the Constitution. It's 4 pages. 4. I've read the Declaration of Independence, one of the most beautiful documents ever. Although the whereas, it's more of a proclamation than a declaration, but I get the idea. Yeah, well, whatever. But it defines a great nation. And there are people who do not believe in that great nation. Some of them have not just spoiled for power, they've actually attained it. It's time for those of us who are now able to see the malevolent reality in their lies to take the country back from them. And that's what this show is. So like I said, if I'm stomping on a particular political party, it's because they're un-American. And that didn't used to be the case. Didn't used to be the case at all. That party used to be an amazingly American party. And then it was overrun by communists and socialists and totalitarians. People who laughingly call themselves progressive. If that's progress, hit the brakes. So there you go. Those are the politics of the broadcast. What we're here to do is give you news, facts, debate, conversation. Depropagandizing news is difficult. It requires endless research, which I do. Sometimes I am right on the button with it. Sometimes I miss. That's why you have access to this broadcast in real time. 817-379-2172. The chat room's open. Join us. But support us too. Subscribe. Pass this broadcast along to your friends. Tell people about it. Hit the thumbs up button. Hit the like button on the platform that you're watching. That helps a lot, by the way. And then if you'd like to throw some money, if you'd like to put your money where my mouth is, then you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. $1 or $2 a month. $1 or $2 a month would help me immeasurably. Let's see what we can do about making that happen. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Let's get back to the news. Today, the Federal Reserve raised its benchmark interest rate by another 75 basis points. That's the fourth straight time in a row that they've done it. They meet every month. The Fed is struggling to bring runaway inflation under control. And that's not an easy thing to do. That's why you should never, ever do anything to stoke inflation in the first place. But that's not what we did. So let's move forward. By the way, they say it's a move that threatens to further slow U.S. economic growth. Well, when you start raising interest rates, if you're the Fed, the aim is to slow economic growth. That is exactly why they do it. And yes, it will create pain, financial pain for millions of households and businesses. The 0.75 percentage point hikes in June, July, September, and now November underscore just how serious Fed officials are about tackling inflation after a string of alarming economic reports. Policymakers voted unanimously to approve the latest supersize hike. The widely expected move puts the key benchmark federal funds rate at a range of 3.75% to 4%, the highest since before the 2008 financial crisis, from near zero in March. It marks the sixth consecutive rate increase this year, puts the interest rates in firmly restrictive territory. However, the Fed sort of laid a hint out there. The Fed also hinted at the possibility of smaller rate increases at future meetings as policymakers acknowledge tighter monetary policy takes time to work its way through the economy, increasing the risk of a recession. Well, that horse is already out of the barn. We are in a recession, and it's going to get deeper. It has to. Why does it have to? It has to tame inflation. And there was no need to create the circumstances for inflation to thrive. There was no reason to do it. And you're saying, but what about COVID-19? Well, what about this? What about that? What about all of these things? Well, I can explain. So I will. Two things happened. During the Trump administration, there was outrageous government spending. Why? Because the government of the United States saw fit to replace the American economy, which had been shut down by COVID-19. Was it the right thing to do? Some people say yes. Some people say no. It was a huge amount of spending in a nation that overspends and overspends and overspends and overspends. I'd keep saying overspends, but it's hard to say that 31.8 trillion times. So once again, I would have seen a smaller amount of money in a more targeted fashion. I would have liked to have seen that. But Donald Trump kind of sort of does that stuff for a living, or at least did before he became the president of the United States. I thought it was a little bit ham-fisted, but then again, the government of the United States is a blunt instrument. It's not real good. It's not real good at precision. So we did what we did. I thought it was too much money. I thought it was thrown around too wildly, and there you go. But then there are forces at work that had big, big problems. Specifically, the American left. The Democrat Party in many states around the United States, were drowning in debt. California, $100 billion in debt and fading fast. New York, Illinois, you know the players. And this was a convenient way of getting them out of financial trouble. And that is exactly what happened. Make no mistake. Bunches of other states got a lot of money too. But the federal government found a way to pay those liberal states' bills. It's just a temporary fix. The problems that exist in those states still exist. They will still overspend. Just like the American government, just like the federal government, we spend way, way too much. Too many political favors, too many bronze plaques with politicians' names on them. Those things are very expensive. Anyway, what ends up happening is that we have all this money in the economy. The marketplace expands to collect extra money. And that's exactly what happened. So prices started to inch up. While we were at it, we decided to play politics with the supply chain. All these ships coming to America to offload in Los Angeles suddenly had to prove their crews didn't have COVID-19. They couldn't prove their crews didn't have COVID-19. They're still floating off the coast of California right now, day after day after day. They've got no place to go. Still trying to figure out a way to offload. So once again, COVID-19 and the political plaything that COVID-19 became haunts us to this very, very day. And all this extra money just thrown into the economy by the federal government, well, we have a problem. So the marketplace starts expanding to pick up that money because it's available. And then the president decided to shut down American energy production. And then what ended up happening is all this money's out there, but there's really no reason for the marketplace to start jumping on trying to grab all this money until the price of gas started going up. Once it topped $5 a gallon, it was Katie bar the door and inflation started going through the roof. Those two decisions, rampant spending after unwise spending, perhaps. I disagreed with it. I disagreed with COVID spending during the Trump administration. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought we were going to pay for it. And then to add on to it through the Biden administration, it's just more of the same bad policy. And yeah, it's bipartisan. But anyway, that being said, here we are. And we have inflation. The Fed exists to control inflation. And they bank on a completely different level than your bank at home does. They have a completely different way of handling things. But this one's pretty basic. Raise interest rates to soak up money, extra money in the marketplace. And what does that do? Well, that puts a chilling effect on borrowing because it's suddenly too expensive. Businesses start putting off capital projects. They stop adding workforce. They stop doing all of those things. Productivity goes down. You're looking at the GDP. Oh, well, it went up last month. Yeah, well, enjoy it while it lasts. We have to slow the economy down. We have to push ourselves into a recession. Now we have an energy problem. Depending on how bad this diesel oil and heating oil problem gets, we may have another spike of inflation throughout the winter. All the while, with this spike of inflation, we're going to have trouble getting control of it because you can't slow down the economy much more. I know that's a long-winded explanation, but I hope you could follow it. To me, it's as clear as bell. It's as clear as a bell. This is why the government playing around with the economy is always a bad idea. And it makes no difference whatsoever which political party is playing around with the economy. Stop it. Government can regulate it? Sure. Sure, regulate the economy. Interfere with it? What are you, nuts? And the answer keeps coming back to whether these people are incompetent or malevolent. And it's really, really hard to tell sometimes. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The Fed up another 3/4 of a point. How far will it go? Stand by. We'll report it here on the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So what did today's Fed decision-making do to the marketplace? Well, the Dow Jones opened at 32,576. It hit 33,071, up a little less than almost 500 points. And then it settled down to lose almost 1,000 points. And it ended up today being minus 380.38. It lost 1.16%. So that's what happened with the Dow Jones Industrial Average after this decision. Okay. All of the major indexes were down. The S&P 500 down 2.13%, 82.24 points. NASDAQ off 316. That was 2.90 points. That's almost 3 points. And the Russ 2K was down 56 points. That's over 3.05 points down. And that'll be worse tomorrow. Not that it really matters much unless you have stocks. If you've got stocks, well, you might have yourself a little bit of a hit. You might want to call your stockbroker and start running for cover, which, by the way, will accelerate the downward trend of the markets. You want to stop the loss. Hopefully, you've already have stop loss agreements in place where you get out of a stock before it costs you everything. Okay? But the thing about it is this. This is purposeful. What we are seeing here with the slowing down of the economy, it's all purposeful. As a matter of fact, the Fed has to do it. In case you're wondering, yes, recessions hurt. They do. They absolutely hurt. But inflation kills. Runaway inflation is almost impossible. It's almost impossible to control. You almost have to stop and start over again. And that's where we find ourselves. Not that we're in that position yet, but just let these amateurs, these politicians, keep playing around with the economy. You know, whether people believe it or not, the Fed board is beholden to the Congress of the United States. And what the Fed often ends up doing is trying to clean up the mess after the politicians get finished with the economy. And that's why the nation's government playing around with the economy is always a bad idea. It's always a bad idea. You know, you're tinkering with the economy, you're tinkering with energy prices. When you start going to things like, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to try to stabilize gasoline prices before an election. That may make political sense, but you have to understand that political sense is always viewed through badly warped and distorted lenses. Somehow taking oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is somehow better from a political standpoint than actually drilling it out of the ground and transporting it on a pipeline and actually creating the opportunity for petroleum companies to create more refining capacity instead of trying to choke off their refining capacity. And all of this stuff seems to be a light switch to a politician. You know, these rate hikes we're talking about, it takes about 18 months to turn this great big aircraft carrier around. The aircraft carrier of the United States economy takes about 18 months. We're just getting started in this recessionary trend. This is just a trend right now. This isn't the recession. The soft landing they keep talking about, well, I suspect that what's going to end up happening is that next month the Fed will raise interest rates maybe 50 basis points or half a point or maybe even 35 basis points. That's too much. They'll probably just raise them 50 basis points. Depends on what these numbers are. Depends on what inflation does. Now, what I would do, I would raise it if I was going to raise it again, because there's going to be Christmas spending and so on, right? So the economy is going to get a sugar high here for a minute. What I'd probably do is I would probably not look at the inflationary numbers insofar as prices are going to continue to rise because of Christmas spending. What I would probably end up doing is I'd probably say, okay, let's just be cool. Let's let this sit for a minute. Go through the rest of the year without maybe doing anything. They probably can't do that. But if they slow these interest raises, if they slow them down at the right moment, and we get lucky with the ebbs and flows of the economy, totally unpredictable, then what can happen is that is they can slowly bring the actual interest increases up smaller, and then eventually start lowering interest rates to try to keep the economy from bottoming out. And I'm not talking about trying to stop a recession. That's not doable. We're going to have a recession. This is just a recessionary trend. We're going to have a recession. But how long it lasts, how deep it goes, depends on some mighty fancy banking by the Fed. And you want them to do it. But you also want politicians to stop screwing around with the economy. We just got to elect the right people quickly. This is the Wells Report. See you next hour. Okay, so one more hour, actually 2 more hours to go. And thanks very much for being with us here on the Wells Report. See you in just a little bit. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do we do on this broadcast? We bring you the news. Truthfully, honestly, we report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. In other words, we de-propagandize the news that is shoved down your throat every day. We're not trying to push you into some decision. We're trying to give you the tools to make one. That's the difference between us and any other news broadcast you watch. I'm not a pundit. I'm a reporter. Do I have an opinion? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got opinions on this stuff. But that's not necessarily what this show's all about. If the show was about my opinion, this would be the John David Wells Show. But that's not what it is. It's the Wells Report. It's the stuff I gather every day and I report it. Wells gathers news and reports it. The Wells Report. And I open this broadcast to you every single day in two ways, maybe other ways as soon as they become available. Right now, it's a chat room and it's a telephone. You can call me at 817-379-2172. You can chat anytime you want to on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Let's see. What else do we have here? Okay. Well, we got a dozen people watching. According to my little thing, we'll see how many people watch on Facebook later. Lots of people watch this on Facebook at different times. Man, it's amazing. It's incredible. And by the way, if you're watching this on Facebook, thank you very much. We are live every day, well, Monday through Friday from 2 until 5 p.m. Central Time. So there you go. So the government of the United States is $31.8 trillion in debt, which means we are $31.8 trillion in debt because we keep electing money-spending maniacs. And what are we getting for our money? Not enough. Not enough. And how do I point that out? Well, the ways to point that out are innumerable, okay? Absolutely innumerable. There are all kinds of ways to point it out. I mean, it's unbelievable. But let's point out something that's, well, shall we say, top of mind. Inside the command center for the U.S. Capitol Police, a handful of officers were going through their routines early Friday morning, cycling through the live feeds from the department's 1,800 cameras used to monitor the nearby Capitol complex, as well as other points, when an officer stopped. There was a screen showing a darkened street 3,000 miles away. Police lights were flashing outside the home of Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. What? The officer in D.C. quickly pulled up additional camera angles from around Pelosi's home, began to backtrack, watching recordings from the minutes before the San Francisco police arrived. There on camera was a man with a hammer, breaking a glass panel, entering the speaker's home. This according to three people familiar with how Capitol Police learned of the break-in and who have been briefed or have viewed the video themselves. The 911 call, the struggle inside the home that followed have led to charges of attempted homicide of the speaker's husband and attempted kidnapping of the speaker, who is second in line to the presidency. Actually, she's third in line to the presidency after the vice president, but I guess the people from the Washington Post just forgot that. Wow. What a slap. What a slap. Can you imagine reading that if you're Kamala Harris? What a slap. It's like the Washington Post, second in line to the presidency. No, the vice president is second in line to the presidency. What's the Washington Post doing? I know what they're doing. They're trying to wish Kamala Harris away. I know. If we don't even think she exists, she may disappear. Oh, no. Anyway, if the Capitol Police were going to stop the attack at the home of any member of Congress, they have perhaps the best chance to do so. because they have these cameras outside the residences of all these people. They are the Capitol Police. And probably the best chance they'd have would be, at Nancy Pelosi's house. This according to several current and former law enforcement officials. Yeah, they spoke to the Washington Post on condition of anonymity because they don't want to be accused of telling anybody the truth. Unbelievable. Just tell the truth. Hi, John David Wells. Know something about the Capitol Police? Yeah, they screwed it up. Yeah, because they got too few people watching too many screens. Yeah, remember the 1,800 screens? They really do have to check those out. When you're looking at one, you can't look at over there. So what you need, well, 100 people? Each one looks at 18 screens? Anyway, the Capitol Police first installed cameras around the home of Nancy Pelosi 8 years ago. It was an around-the-clock security deal, and for many months after the attacks of January 6th, the San Francisco police cruiser sat outside her home day and night. But hours after Pelosi left San Francisco last week and returned to D.C., much of the security detail left with her. Officers in Washington stopped continuously monitoring video feeds outside the house. The targeted security, lack of full-time active surveillance, even at the home of a member of Congress with the most death threats, reflect the competing demands facing local and federal law enforcement agencies, as well as the balances that lawmakers, their family, and security officials have to strike in the nearly 2 years since the attack on the Capitol. That's the Washington Post, blaming all this on the attacks at the Capitol. Yeah, let's go back through that. The targeted security and lack of full-time active surveillance. Full-time active surveillance? This brings something back to me that has always been a sore point. The fiscal year 2022 federal budget. Okay. Let's see. The total budget. Let's get back to this. It says something about the fiscal year 2022 budget proposes $131.8 billion in discretionary budget authority and $1.5 trillion in mandatory funding. How nice. Let's see. The budget total. Let's try the word total, shall we? See, what's the total? No, that's not the total. No. They're trying to tell you that the federal budget is $131.8 billion. Are you kidding? One bill alone was $1.7 trillion. What the hell are they talking about here? Okay, so that's useless. Once again, no truth. How much money do these people spend every year? How much? Is it $131.8 billion? No. Even $1.5 trillion in mandatory spending? That's closer, but it's more than that. All the spending we've been talking about regarding COVID-19 is above the $1.5 trillion in mandatory funding. I can go the fiscal year 2022 federal budget total. Can't get the numbers. What does that tell you about this government? Well, it tells you a government that's doing its dead level best to try to minimize the damage they cause every single flipping year. Anyway, with all that money being spent, we don't have enough money to watch the Speaker's house 24/7, 365, huh? Oh, it's worse than that. We're $31.8 trillion in debt. We don't have flags on Mars. Remember how putting flags on the moon was, according to Democrat politicians, we need to be spending that money down here. Well, we did spend that money down here. We spent a hell of a lot more down here, all the way up to $31.8 trillion. Trillion. We don't have flags on Mars. If the actual moon missions, the Apollo moon missions, were a waste of money, what do you call what happened after we stopped doing them? We don't have enough money. All the money spent by the federal government, we didn't have enough money to watch the Speaker's house. Anyway, let's keep moving. Sorry. The targeted security, lack of full-time active surveillance is all because of January 6th, naturally. Yeah, baloney. The Capitol Police have been working to implement more than 100 security improvements recommended by outside experts, including enhancements to officer training, equipment, protocols, and staffing. But the department has simultaneously faced a tenfold increase in threats to members of Congress who regularly return to their home districts and crisscross the country. Yeah. Okay, so let me bring something else up. You know, if you were a part of a government that wasn't infuriating the people you govern on a near daily basis, you probably wouldn't have to have all this security. You probably have to have some because there are crazy people out there. You can't do anything about the crazy people. Okay? But you sure can stop poking the bear in the eye with a stick day in, day out. And then have your handmaidens in the U.S. media continue to explain why being poked in the eye with a stick is really what you want. That's exactly right. As a matter of fact, if we don't poke you in the eye with a stick, there'll be a Republican that comes along behind us and pokes you in the ear. That would be worse. Really? You see, you don't have to have barbed wire. You don't have to have razor wire and barriers around the Capitol building if what's going on in there is not infuriating to the people of the United States. And I got to be perfectly honest with you. When you annoy 74 million people, maybe it's because you're saying something you shouldn't be saying, like they're all fascists. By the way, keep that thought in mind because there's more when it comes to how MAGA Republicans are the enemy. There's more. It's coming up. So the Capitol Police, in statements, Tom Manger said that while there have been improvements, for instance, the department is on track to hire 280 additional officers this year. Wow, that's great. So what are they going to be watching? They're going to be watching what? 20 cameras instead of, anyway. The current political climate is going to necessitate additional layers of physical security. Yeah, you see, when you're trying to turn the United States into a totalitarian country, you've got to have security all over the place. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there for whatever it was worth. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. And so here we go. Pelosi, Capitol Police cameras saw the break-in but didn't do anything about it. Okay, so what about this MAGA thing you were just talking about? Another accusation against MAGA Americans? It's next. Thanks very much for being a part of the show. We'll return in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Our chat room is going. You can join us there. We're talking a little bit about the craziness surrounding the craziness. The craziness surrounding the Paul Pelosi attack. See, you can't do anything about the crazy man who decided to perpetrate the Paul Pelosi attack. But you can do something about the craziness that comes after that attack, and that is to reject it wholesale. So this is the headline from the Daily Mail describing Paul Pelosi's attacker. Here's the headline. Revealed. Paul Pelosi's attacker planned a suicide mission and had a list of other politicians he wanted to kill. As his former boss says, he was completely awash in conspiracies. And then they make a list. Pizzagate, stolen election, and MAGA. All of it. So a major news source, a major world news source, is now trying to say people who want to make America great again are part of a right-wing conspiracy theory. That's infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. See, I happen to believe those people are patriots. I happen to believe those people are like me, in that they can read the Constitution of the United States. They can also read the newspapers. They can also see that this sick, twisted propagandist media is propping up a political party bent on running the United States of America into a ditch. And they happen to be doing it as fast as they possibly can. For what reason? Once again, we're left with trying to determine whether it's incompetence or malevolence. You choose. But either of those two is completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. You can't have malevolent people running the government of the United States. You can't have incompetent people running the government of the United States. Why are either of that, whatever that group of people is, whether incompetent or malevolent, why are they in charge? Gets back to a media like this that takes a look at American patriots and says, nah, you guys are conspiracy nuts, just like the guy who hit Paul Pelosi on the head with a hammer. Oh, yeah? And let's talk a little bit about, say, for example, GOP, Republican sort ofs. They're not Republicans. They're not conservatives. They're Republican sort ofs. Rhinos, that's another way of saying it, Republicans in name only. Former Governor Christy Todd Whitman, she was the governor of New Jersey, said in an Axios News Shaper event that a part of her hopes that all the crazies do win during next week's midterm elections. And she's talking about not the crazy Democrats we were talking about yesterday. She's talking about the crazy Republicans she believes are running for office. Right? And then she says, but then again, I realize, no, I don't want to live in that world, and I don't want to leave it for my grandkids either, the damage they can do. Whitman told Axios' Alana Treen that the Republican Party has become a cult. Well, my fellow cult members, except I'm not a Republican, I'm a conservative. So Republicans, do you feel like you're in a cult? Do you feel like trying to make America great again? Can you imagine this? Just how intellectually bankrupt do you have to be to try to say that an entire political movement built around the words "Make America Great Again" is somehow either unpatriotic or some kind of dangerous conspiracy? Dangerous to what? The Constitution of the United States? No, that's the paper that calls us to try to make America great again. No, it's dangerous to the clods that are running the country into the ditch aforementioned in this paragraph. Starting to make me mad. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Thanks for joining us today. So one of the things that we have seen in the last week or so, something that I haven't spent a lot of time with, is Elon Musk and his finally appreciated takeover of Twitter. There have been a lot of interesting things that have happened. One, the American media is freaking out again, and that's because they finally had an entire populace using Twitter that could be censored at will, which, of course, is the model that they want to have pervade American media. They want to be able to say, this is the way it is, and if anybody disagrees, they need to be slapped into oblivion by a group of fact checkers. And that's exactly what Twitter had been doing. The famous example is the Ayatollah of Iran, the Ayatollah being able to tweet at will, but Donald Trump, a former president, not able to tweet at will. That was the death knell for leftist control of Twitter. And now the left is all crazy because Elon Musk bought the entire business out from underneath them. By golly, we're going to have a government investigation. We're going to find out if that deal's okay. Excuse me? You're not going to do anything of the kind. You're going to sit down and shut up, just like you've been telling us to do for the last 10 years. What's the matter with you people? So Elon Musk takes over Twitter. He walks into the place with a sink. Literally a kitchen sink. He says, let that sink in. Management evacuated from the building instantly. Gone. Don't worry about them. They all have golden parachutes. Good. So here's the story from Fox Business. Less than a week after officially closing the $44 billion acquisition to take Twitter private at $54.20 per share. It's $54.20 a share. Elon Musk already revealed major changes for the social media platform. Twitter stock, which was suspended from trading on October 28th, is set to delist from the New York Stock Exchange on November 8th. This is a Fox Business recap of the top 5 moves the world's richest man has announced or made in his first week as Twitter's new owner. First thing he did, he dissolved the Twitter board. According to an 8K filing last Thursday, Elon Musk became the sole director of Twitter after dissolving its board of directors. The board included Chairman Brett Taylor, former Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal, members Omid Kordestani, David Rosenblatt, Martha Lane Fox, Patrick Pichette, Egon Durbin, Fei Li, and Mimi Alameahau. Musk said in a tweet, Elon Musk dissolved the Twitter's board, became the sole director of the company, having his own vision of what the platform should become. He is best able to make decisions related to this. Yeah. Good for him. By the way, Elon said, this is just temporary. Good for him. Individuals helping Musk reshape the company in the interim include Jared Birchall, the head of Musk's family office, his lawyer, Alex Spiro, angel investor Jason Calacanis, PayPal's founding chief operating officer and venture capitalist David Sachs, Twitter's head of safety and integrity, Yoel Roth, and Sriram Krishnan, there we go, a former Twitter executive and general partner at a venture firm, Andreessen Horowitz. So that's what's going on right now. That's who's running the place. Following the closing of the acquisition, Musk fired Agrawal, Chief Financial Officer Ned Siegel, and Vijaya Gadde, Twitter's head of legal policy and trust. General Counsel Sean Edgett also confirmed on Twitter he's no longer with the company after several outlets reported he was included in the firings. Ned Siegel, Thursday concluded 5 years at Twitter. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have worked with such an incredible group of people building the world's town square for all of our stakeholders. The work isn't complete, but we made meaningful progress. Sean Edgett said, Twitter is full of the most amazing people. I have so much gratitude for my former team and colleagues. Keep taking good care of the place Tweagle, Tweagle. In addition, Chief Customer Officer Sarah Personette and Chief People and Diversity Officer Delana Brand have both resigned. Hi, folks. Wanted to share that I resigned on Friday from Twitter. My work access was officially cut off last night. Delana Brand. After 4 amazing years, I resigned from Twitter on Friday. It's truly been one of the best experiences of my career, and every moment embodied love where you work. See, these are classy moves. These are classy things. These are classy ways to get out of a company. All right? It's true. You know, the politicians aren't going to say things like that. They'll probably not say much of anything. In fact, they'll probably just disappear because their job was not to make Twitter the world's town square. Their job was to censor people who said things they didn't like or disagreed with their politics. They don't say things on the way out the door. They just wait for their next opportunity. Twitter employees have been uneasy for months about the possibility of major layoffs at the company under Musk's ownership. He's talking about firing just about everybody. The Washington Post reported last month Musk was planning to lay off 75% of the Twitter workforce. That's probably not going to be the case. He's also talking about the idea of having people work 80 hours a week. What's that? Well, that's how you weed out the people you don't want. The people you want will work 80 hours a week. Won't kill you. They'll work 80 hours a week until Musk realizes they're not going anywhere. Interesting. So anyway, that would reduce the staffing. 75% layoff would reduce the staffing from about 7,500 employees to around 2,000. Bloomberg reported Musk had denied the 75% figure. A separate Post report suggested the first round of layoffs will target 25% of the Twitter workforce. Musk has disputed a false New York Times report that Twitter layoffs would take place before November 1st in order to avoid paying out stock grants. Sorry about that. Let me get back to what I was doing there. No, that's not what I want. That's what I want. Yeah. Would avoid paying out stock grants to employees. That's probably not going to happen. Elon Musk isn't a guy that screws people over. I don't get that from him at all. I think what he's going to do is he's going to take care of everybody per spec and let them go. You know, it's like this. And this is important that you keep something in mind here. I learned this lesson myself. Okay? If you're in a situation, if you're in a professional situation, and there are things happening around you that are wrong, and you know they're wrong, if you care about the company, report what you see up the chain of command. If you are rebuffed, right then, update your resume, start sending it out, and do your job at the best possible level for as long as it takes for you to find another job. And then when you find that other job, don't inform the people you're working for that are doing the wrong things. Simply give them 2 weeks' notice. Don't say anything about it. Say, gosh, you know what? This has been some of the best time I've ever spent. Thanks very much to all my coworkers. God bless your future endeavors. And walk out of the building. There are a lot of people that will sit there and see something going badly wrong and not doing anything about it, but living in it because they hope it's going to change. The agents of change are not those people who simply tolerate what's going on around them. The agents of change are the ones that suddenly disappear. Those are the people that actually get something done. It also comports with something else that I believe in your professional life. You need to be the CEO of you. Use your business mind to make your next move. Be benevolent. Fiduciary even. Do the right thing simply because it's the right thing. But make sure you know what's next. Make sure you're not surprised because of somebody else making a decision. And if you're in a situation where you're realizing, gosh, I don't know what's going to happen next, again, update your resume and find another company. Do your job. Work at it. Polished work. And then once you find your new job, again, hey, thanks very much. Appreciate it. You have 2 weeks. Don't say why. Don't say anything. Just leave. Because if you don't know what's happening next, if you wake up and have anxiety about your future at a company, get away from it. There's a reason. And you know it. You know these words that I'm telling you are true, but for some reason we keep setting aside those opportunities to save ourselves from stupid stuff. You see, what ended up happening was with these people at Twitter, they knew something was wrong. They knew as soon as they started getting rid of people that disagreed politically with the management, as soon as people started getting dropped from the platform for political statements that management just didn't like, when they held that up, when they held those decisions up with the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, and you couldn't, like a magnet, you just couldn't push them together, they should have realized something was badly wrong. Twitter doesn't exist in this gigantic globalist union of liberals. Twitter exists in the real world. As a matter of fact, it is a reflection of the real world. That's what Twitter is. It's the town square. That's the real world. And if indeed you find they should have seen that they weren't living in the real world, that's when they should have sounded the alarm. And they didn't. That's why 2,000 of them are going to be gone. Because they knew something bad was happening and didn't do anything about it. Well, hell, what can I do? I'm just a peon. I'm just a worker bee. Yeah? You know what happens when all the worker bees stop doing work? The hive dies. That's what happens. See, the thing about it is being an employee is not indentured servitude. You don't have to choke down everything that comes down the pike. And then, I know what you're thinking. You're saying those are brave words for a guy who now does an independent broadcast because he's now working at a radio station. I get it. But what you don't know is that I was the general manager of that radio station. For the last 2 years of my employment, I didn't take a paycheck. And the reason I didn't take a paycheck is because I wanted my employees to have a paycheck. I could have bankrupted the whole company, but I didn't. So, by the way, always be curious instead of judgmental. Ted Lasso, American philosopher. In May, Elon Musk said that Twitter would be super focused on hardcore software engineering, design, info security, and server hardware following the completion of his takeover. In response to a user's question on Sunday about what was most messed up at Twitter, Musk replied, "There seem to be 10 people managing for every one person coding." You mean like public schools? Yeah, we got 3 people that are administrating and we got 1 person teaching. What? Bloomberg News reported last week Twitter's engineers were unable to make changes to the platform code after Musk brought in a team of engineers from Tesla to review it and explain what the company needs. How convenient. You know what that's called? That's called sabotage, headed out the door. Elon Musk was right to try to get out of this deal. He was absolutely correct. Look at this. Sabotage on the way out of the door? Yeah. That was the 3rd thing he did. The 4th thing that happened was Musk announced plans to form a content moderation council with widely divergent views. The group will include representatives from the civil rights community and groups who face hate-fueled violence. Twitter will not allow anyone who was deplatformed for violating Twitter rules back on the platform until we have a clear process for doing so, which will take at least a few more weeks. Yeah, those people, those degenerate people are degenerate people, and there are plenty of those, right? But most of the people that I dealt with, like James Woods, for example, he wasn't a degenerate person. He was just somebody that disagreed with Twitter management, so they shadow banned him. I remember one time I had like 3,500. I had 3,500 followers. The next day I had 2,750. How did that happen? They could have been bots. In other words, fake accounts. Or they could have been blown off by somebody running the place. I wonder which was true. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So conservatives on Twitter cheered after the official White House Twitter account was slapped with a community-based fact check on a recent claim that President Biden made about Social Security. There's a new sheriff in town at Twitterville, and apparently they slapped the president around. By the way, I saw this original article. They've since changed it. Yeah, the circumstance was, they said it was humiliating. The White House was humiliated when they had to delete the tweet. Nobody's humiliated when they have to delete a tweet. Just delete it. It's not humiliation. You know, it's like saying something rude in public. Okay, you can take it as far as you want to. If you want to be humiliated, by all means. Just go, whoops, my bad, move on. But no, Fox wanted people to know the White House was humiliated. Oh, baloney. Baloney. They deleted the tweet. That's okay. Let's try to be reasonable. I mean, Washington can't be reasonable. Politicians can't be reasonable. The mainstream media can't be reasonable, but we can. Right here. Every day. Let's do that. What do you think? Anyway, so Fox News reporting this. The conservatives cheered after the official White House Twitter account was slapped with a community-based fact check. In a recent tweet that is now deleted, the official White House Twitter account stated seniors are getting the biggest increase in their Social Security checks in 10 years through President Biden's leadership. Technically, that's true. See, President Biden took over the presidency where inflation was 1.4%. It's now 8.2%. There are automatic cost of living increases built into Social Security. So because inflation went through the roof, the cost of living raise is very large this time. But it's because of President Biden's leadership, and that's technically true. President Biden trashed the economy through inflation, and now inflation is reacting to Social Security. And this is something where you can say, okay, so we got inflation. What are the good things we can say? Oh, yeah, cost of living increase. Yeah, a cost of living adjustment. That's gone up because of inflation. There we go. And the Washington Post gave them a bunch of Pinocchios because they were lying about it. And, of course, Twitter said, sorry, can't do that. Yeah. Twitter has a bird watch feature. I didn't know anything about it. It allows certain approved users the ability to annotate or add context to other tweets. Someone fact-checked the statement. Underneath the White House tweet, a text box provided context to the statement explaining the increase in Social Security was a cost of living adjustment to compensate for inflation. Man, you got to hand it to them. Why is it, by the way, that we're hearing this about this on Twitter and not on the front page of the Washington Post? Oh, that's right, because the Washington Post is part of the political machine. Yeah. It stated seniors, blah, 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 blah. And then they provided a source link. Conservative users expressed satisfaction with Twitter actually fact-checking the president. Yeah. Incredible. The White House's dumb tweet celebrating the increase in Social Security checks gets a Twitter fact check because they left out the fact that the increase was caused by inflation. And you see, it's exactly what we do here. Propaganda is the science of leaving things out. Not putting things in. Putting something ridiculous in to a news story or something like that, easy to disprove. Leaving something out, harder to catch. So they left it out because, well, the inflation generated by policies this president has instituted. That's why the cost of living adjustment is so high. Propaganda. And yeah, we're right to be able to stand up and say, yo, this is not true. This is not true. Because it isn't. But you don't need a newspaper telling you that something's wrong. We're Americans. We have the tools, and we also have the freedom and liberty to be able to figure this stuff out on our own. Likewise, we simply do not need to have be led around by some corrupt news organization so that we know what to think. We simply must stop following in the footsteps of political sociopaths. And hopefully that's what's happening at Twitter. Now remember something. When it comes to Twitter, biased censorship is biased censorship. That is all. It doesn't make any difference who's doing the censoring. If Elon Musk jumps down into the road of censorship just like his predecessors, I'll be just as critical of him as I was his predecessors. You know, I got to be honest with you. Facebook has been really, really good to me. They really have. They kept me on their platform. They allowed me to broadcast live on their platform for years. But I still talked about when they were doing something wrong. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. Thanks very much for being with us this hour. And just like that, we have another hour of the broadcast coming up, so stay where you are. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly, truthfully. We analyze the news for fact and bias. After starting with the news and after the analysis, we're able to de-propagandize the news. We're left with reasonable understandings of what's going on around us, which is what news is supposed to be, but sadly is not, poisoned by politics. It's awful. And this show is the antidote. At least it aims to be the antidote. It's one guy in one studio in one city. That's what this broadcast is, which means I have to work really, really hard. And I do. I hope you find value in this show. Join us for the debate process. So it's news, analysis, commentary, and debate. The debate part depends on you. Join us. You can do it on the phone, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Or you can also join us. You can also join us on the chat room, which is Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. We have all kinds on the chat room, including people that are, shall we say, of a different political bent. I base my politics on the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Federalists. That's where the politics of this show lie. All right, it doesn't lie with Republican or Democrat thought or policymaking. And there are people that still haven't gotten to that point yet because I guess they don't have enough experience seeing all this stuff, but I do. Anyway, we keep getting a Democrat talking point that inflation is a worldwide issue. No, inflation is not a worldwide issue. I believe that inflation in Japan, for example, one of the world's largest economies, is somewhere south of 3%, as I recall. Ours is 8.2. So once again, like I said before, perhaps you should do more research before you opine. Just saying. But you're a kid. You'll figure that out sometime. Anyway, this is breaking news. The gunman who carried out the Parkland school shooting was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole today. This after a jury last month recommended that life sentence instead of the death penalty. It angered many of the families of the 17 people he killed. The gunman murdered 17 people in 2018 in a South Florida high school. He's expected to be sentenced in prison without the possibility of parole. I don't know what that is. That's the original story. Okay. Well, Nicholas Cruz is gone theoretically forever, but something tells me, and I don't know exactly why, but something tells me that he's going to get out. Something tells me his demented work against society isn't over. God, I hope I'm wrong. That's what the death penalty is for. The death penalty is so you don't have to worry about any of that. But unfortunately, we didn't use it this time. The Washington Post. The Washington Post is an interesting newspaper. It was a bastion of American journalism until the Watergate days, and then it turned into this lurid kind of muckraking sort of we're trying to cling to balance, but we keep finding ourselves in a position where we just can't get it done. The Washington Post. They hired a brilliant conservative named George Will. And George Will was a guy who used to be on This Week with David Brinkley. That's where he came to national prominence. Brilliant conservative thought and analysis. He was great at it. And continued to be great at it until Donald Trump came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower. And this normally sure-footed conservative analyst and columnist and pundit lost his way. He didn't realize that the nation had changed. He was a part of the Republican establishment, the so-called conservative establishment. He was more conservative than Republican, but still, he believed in the William F. Buckley idea that the Republican Party was the best repository of conservatism in the United States. which it most assuredly is not. And that was before President Trump showed up. The Republican Party was an apologist for anti-American Democrat Party policy and remains pretty much so today. That's why we call them rhinos. That's why we refer to Mitch McConnell as a moderate Republican. He's not a moderate Republican. He's not. He's a Democrat enabler. That's what he does. I mean, that's just simple. That's real world analysis. Okay. And by the way, that real world analysis occurred before Donald Trump, too. Anyway, let's move on. George Will continues to work for the Washington Post. His virulent hatred of Donald Trump, his personal case of Trump derangement syndrome, cost him his position at ABC and badly damaged his professional standing. Now, he doesn't care because he believes that when it comes to Donald Trump, he's absolutely right, and that's okay. That's fine. You can probably make that decision if you choose to. But you also got to keep something else in mind. For example, I'll use my own example. You are certainly capable, someone in this position, you are certainly capable of just saying, screw it, I'm going to walk off. But it's like the job I do here, mostly in obscurity. Most people have no idea this show even exists. If they know the show exists, they look at me and go, who is that guy? He doesn't look like a news anchor. Well, maybe I look like what news anchors ought to look like. A regular guy in Fort Worth, Texas. Anyway, if I walk away from this, who's going to do it? If I stop reporting the news and analyzing it for fact and bias and de-propagandizing it, who's going to do it? Is this costing me? You bet. Everything you see here comes out of my pocket instead of, and by the way, there's no paycheck going in yet. If this show's good enough, it'll happen. We'll see. But George Will, a brilliant conservative, took himself out of the game because he misread the people of the United States. The people of the United States were bone tired of Republican Party enablement of disastrous Democrat policy. Well, how do you know that's true, Wells? Well, here's how I know that's true, Wells. $31.8 trillion in national debt. There were Republicans on Capitol Hill when every dime of that horse-choking gob of debt was run up. So somebody was enabling somebody. What we need up there in Capitol Hill is we need a whole bunch of people fighting tooth and nail to start handling the money of the people of the United States like the money of the people of the United States, not some endless gob that they can access at political will. And George Will walked away from his position to tell that story. In fact, he voted for Joe Biden because he hated Trump so much. It was surprising to see him make such a silly error. He forgot who he was working for. He thought he was working for himself. Just like Liz Cheney. Except George Will had much better both intellectual and conservative credentials than Liz Cheney. Remember, Liz Cheney came from a family that wasn't conservative. They were neocons. Anyway, that's another story for another day. But George Will? No. George Will was a rock rib conservative that just couldn't stand Donald Trump. And he forgot that the people of the United States were the people he was working for, not himself. And so we lost George Will. Well, he's back. He wrote a column in the Washington Post. And this is where all this comes together. Washington Post columnist George Will, who voted for President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, has now called on both to not seek re-election in 2024. The scathing piece came out today. If you have not read it, go to the Washington Post. It is WAPO.com, and search George Will. He's a conservative known for his staunch opposition to Donald Trump. He was unsparing, writing that Biden is not just past his prime, but even adequacy is in his past. Of Harris, he wrote, her style betrays a self-satisfied exaggeration of her aptitudes. Lacking natural talent, she needs to prepare, but evidently doesn't. Will voted for Biden in 2020, the first time he's ever supported a Democrat, but now he wants a new candidate. In 2024, the Republican Party might present the nation with a presidential nominee whose unfitness has been demonstrated. This, according to George Will. After next Tuesday's sobering election results, Democrats should resolve not to insult and imperil the nation by doing likewise. Wow. See, I told you he could write. This guy's good. He's good. He's talking about Donald Trump. He refers to Donald Trump as someone whose unfitness has been demonstrated. His unfitness. This is where George Will betrays his inability to actually see Donald Trump for his results instead of the blinding haze of his own hatred. Why does he hate Donald Trump so much? I don't have any idea. Probably because George Will, even though a public conservative, is probably a leftist who's watching Donald Trump destroy years of leftist work, which is what he did in his first 4 years and what he will do more of in his second, if he is reelected. And that's not a lead pipe cinch here. Will wrote that Biden's recent falsehood that he had signed a student debt forgiveness law was alarming, under that he shouldn't seek another term. It's an alarming reminder that he shouldn't seek another term. Rather, the handout was done through executive action and not a bill he signed into law that passed by a vote or two, as Biden erroneously claimed. Quote, Biden was not merely, again, embellishing his achievements. This is not just another of his verbal fender benders. There is no less than dismay. There is no less than dismaying explanation for his complete confusion. What vote? Who voted? Such was the starkness of Biden's remark that even CNN fact-checker Daniel Dale, who has gone weeks at various points without penning a fact-check of the president, called him out in an October 24th article. It is frightening that Biden does not know or remember what he recently did regarding an immensely important policy. He must be presumed susceptible to future episodes of similar bewilderment. He should leave the public stage on January 20th, 2025. This, according to George Will. There's more. He talks about Kamala Harris. George Will is brilliant. If you're a Trump supporter, he's probably upset. You're probably upset with George Will, but take care. You're listening to the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. George Will has written a column in the Washington Post. You need to go read for yourself. WashingtonPost.com, WAPO, WAPO.com. Search George Will and read this thing. You know, George Will hates Donald Trump. Just hates him. Decided to walk away from his job at ABC News because he just couldn't stand the man. George Will has what I consider to be an unfortunate case of Trump derangement syndrome. And that's because Donald Trump represents a more populist Republican Party instead of the finely dressed, perfectly coiffed Republican Party that does nothing for the American people. The American people became frustrated and walked away. And Donald Trump was the result. I dare say, had George Will done a better job, then what would have happened is that Donald Trump probably wouldn't have existed. And I've got a point on that after we discuss Kamala Harris in George Will's commentary. Will ripped her eerie strangeness as manifest in such remarks as her expounding on her love of electric school buses, her word salad on the significance of the passage of time, her repetition of the phrase worked together at a recent summit, and her widely panned remarks that have become right-wing fodder. Quote, this from George Will, she sounds, as a critic has said, like someone giving a book report on a book she has not read. Complacency and arrogance make a ruinous compound, unquote. Then he went on to say this, regarding Biden and Harris, the National Democrat Party faces two tests of stewardship. Its imprimatur cannot again be bestowed on either of them. Biden is not just past his prime. Even adequacy is in his past. And this is Harris's prime. This is the best she has. Biden has repeatedly said he is planning on seeking re-election. While a conservative who has spoken out against the Biden administration on policy matters like student debt handouts, Will has made no secret of his disdain at the idea of another term for Trump. Trump is an open book who has been reading himself into the nation for 40 years, he quipped in a piece earlier this year. That may be. But George, people like the book. They do. So George Will has made this abundantly clear. That was by the way, CNN, their rendition of his work. By the way, also, I wanted to tell you imprimatur. Okay? Imprimatur. That's a person's acceptance or guarantee that something is of a good standard. In other words, the Democrat Party cannot warrant any longer that Joe Biden is indeed their good standard. He wasn't a good standard when they started. And I said so. And I continue to say so. Not a bad guy. I defended Joe Biden on his bumbles from the beginning. That was, of course, before I understood what his depth of craziness involved in his son, which is a book that has yet to be written. I mean, I'm beginning to think I might have been wrong about his overall amiable goodness underlying an incapacity to be able to speak properly about anything. He may be a bad guy after all. But we'll see. But you see, George, you're the reason why Joe Biden is president. Because you misread the reality around you. That's very bad for a guy that's a social commentator. I understood what Donald Trump was. I understand why the American people still focus on him. Because he's the only person in Washington, D.C. that cares about the people of the United States. And, sir, that is demonstrated. Something you failed to mention. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. One of the things that George Will is right about, again, is that the Democrat Party has a huge problem. The wrong people are in charge of that party. The wrong people are speaking. The wrong people are leading. And those people have brought arguable pestilence upon the land. But moreover, they brought ruin upon themselves. Let me explain what I'm talking about here. The Democrat Party is filled with smug, arrogant, hubris-saturated jackasses. There can be no more appropriate mascot for any group of people than the aforementioned jackass for the Democrat Party. Make no mistake, the Republican Party has its problems. They're deep and they're immovable, just like George Will. The thing about the Republican Party is while the left finds itself in jackass mode most of the time, the American right is more ulterior. They accuse their political opponents of being liars. They do it right. They'll just walk up and tell you it's because they lie, they say. Well, you know, lies of omission are still lies, correct? The Republican Party is great at that. They're great at remaining apparently wise and silent, while they allow Democrat Party policies to move forward, but with less ruinous expense to the United States. But they let the policy continue. And by the way, Social Security, if you look at its inception, not really a bad idea. It was a perfect time to have a secondary income tax to pay for the Second World War. It was actually brilliant on the part of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But look at what happened to it. It's grown into a behemoth. It is the number one budget item in the United States budget. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It is the tail wagging the dog. There's a simple solution that stops all of this garbage, stops the rampant overspending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know why they don't just immediately do it. Except, of course, that it will eviscerate, without costing the government a dime, it will eviscerate political power of people bent on the destruction of this nation. Which is why we don't have this easy solution. More about that on another day. If you're really curious, ask me, I'll tell you. So we have these two political parties that are supposed to be in conflict. They are supposed to be adversarial. The triangle looks like this. From the left, the Democrat Party looks to the Republican Party, then looks northward to the Constitution of the United States, and then down to its policymaking. That's the triangle for them. Likewise, the Republican Party. They look at the Democrats, the Constitution, and their policymaking. And these policies are in conflict. When party politicians of these two parties start talking about the value of bipartisanship, you're about to get screwed. The entire American government is based on party compromise, not party rule, not party deal making. It's compromise. The government doesn't get what it wants. Arguably, the Republicans can say, well, that's what we've been doing. Yeah? Right up to the point where we could have gotten rid of Obamacare, this before the disaster of the COVID-19 mess. Many of us were talking about the government of the United States having no place in American healthcare, zero. And then we had something that proved it beyond any form of spin. which takes us back to these smug, arrogant, hubris-soaked people that convinced themselves that they were so talented and magnificent that they could get an eggplant elected to the presidency of the United States. They had to do something. Their own primary process was about to nominate a socialist. Well, a fake socialist. Bernie Sanders is a fraud. He's an imitation. He's never lived in a socialist country. He has no idea what the ravages of socialism are. He's just one of these northeastern clods that thinks it's just so avant-garde to believe that the Soviet Union was right and America was nothing more than a capitalist bourgeoisie dump. Yeah, Bernie Sanders saturated with the politics of envy because he was living in a car, I suppose. Anyway, that moving on again. Because the Democrat Party wanted Bernie Sanders' money, which he had a lot of, for reasons I have no idea, they let him stay in the party. Now we have the progressive wing of the Democrat Party, which is nothing more than a bunch of wannabe communists. Again, they've never lived in a communist country, but they are sure that they are the right people to do everything. I assure you that they are just a bunch of egocentric, smug, hubris, bloated, arrogant snots that really need to get back to what they do best. In the case of AOC, she needs to be the mouthy wench at the bar. She's really good at that. She's cute, she dances well, and she's a snot. Perfectly suited to run a bar in Queens. But the Democrat Party wouldn't weed out those people. If I was running the Democrat Party, what I would do, first of all, I'd say, all you socialist guys, Progressive Caucus, you have 24 hours to determine whether or not you're going to be a Democrat or a socialist. If you choose socialism, that's fine. Here is the number. Here is the number of the Socialist Party of America. You are no longer Democrats. By the way, you're no longer welcome to caucus with us either. You can try to get something done by yourself. We are turning our page on socialism in the Democrat Party. The second thing I'd do is I'd make everybody who was left, and that's most of them, rewatch John F. Kennedy's inauguration speech from 1961. And I would point at the screen and say, this is the Democrat Party. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. We are not a country of handouts. We are a country of hand-ups. We're not a country of handouts. If you need a job, join the Peace Corps. That's what it's for. You will travel the world and you will export American graciousness. You will do something for your nation. You will bring goodwill to the world. Join the frickin' Peace Corps. You will stop trying to believe that the Constitution is some outmoded document. No, it's not. It is a just, benevolent, perfect limit on runaway government power. If you don't think that's the case, I give you the same figure again, $31.8 trillion of national debt. Effective immediately, the Democrat Party is no longer the party of power. The Democrat Party is the power of optimistic stewardship of the greatest nation on the planet. That's what I would say the Democrat Party needs to do. But that's not who they are. Revert back to the smug, arrogant, hubris-soaked snots that think they can do anything. They can't. They just elected a completely senile old man who had a great run as the Vice President of the United States under Barack Obama. That should have been where the political road ended for Joe Biden, but they had to do something, and he was the only candidate that had a chance. Against Donald Trump. And so they picked Joe Biden. Don't worry about it. We can get him elected. Well, congratulations, you did. Congratulations, you got Joe Biden. Well, George Will just told you not to run him in 2024. You better not. You better take his advice. Same thing with Harris. She's out of her depth as soon as she picked up the phone and said, "You want me to be what?" She didn't have the mental capacity to be able to make a rational decision. Why? Again, the aforementioned smug hubris, arrogance. I'm the greatest human being on the planet. No, you're not. You're the luckiest human being on the planet. But you have to know what you know. And moreover, ma'am, you have to know what you don't know, and you haven't got a clue. You should have said, "I'm not qualified to be the vice president of the United States." Well, hell, you were running for president just a second ago. Yeah, that was a mistake too. I got to get back to what I do best. I'm just going to be a lawyer in California and stay out of the way. But she doesn't have that humility. Now she's the vice president of the United States and useless. Thank you, Democrat Party. Thank you, Democrat Party. It's not like you don't have people with brains in your party. You just don't listen to them. And you also don't have you have a bunch of leftist crazy people that speak before they think. You got to get those guys away from television cameras. The Democrat Party is in disarray. And why do I care? Why do I care? You're a conservative. Hey, when somebody's screwing up, man, don't interrupt them. I'll tell you why. Because the Republican Party is equally useless. It's worthless. The Republican Party ignores the people of the United States. The Democrat Party operates in spite of the people of the United States. We are not served by this government. We are exploited by this government, and that is bipartisan. Now, we're stuck with the process we're stuck with. Very likely, Donald Trump will win the 2024 election if he chooses to run. I doubt very sincerely that Ron DeSantis is going to be able to do something with Donald Trump. I'm also equally sure that Mike Pompeo, even though he's more qualified than Donald Trump, is not capable of being able to prove to the people of the United States that he is a better presidential candidate than Donald Trump. Maybe 2028 for Mike Pompeo. We'll see. And Donald Trump comes with a whole bunch of really bad baggage. I get it. But take a look at who's running the show now. It's not even Joe Biden. It's a bunch of people you don't even know. Those same idiots. Those same smug, arrogant, hubris-soaked idiots that got Joe Biden elected. Those are the people that really think they're kingmakers. They're not. They're mistake makers. They're mistake makers. And all because they refuse to clean their party up and turn it into something that people in the United States need instead of something the people of the United States fear. And the reason that I'm so serious about it is because the Republican Party, being useless, needs a political party to compete with. The Democrat Party used to be that party, but now it doesn't care about America, so it doesn't care about being better. That's why they give us garbage. Competition is the crucible of excellence, some genius once said. And I will be perfectly honest with you. The Democrat Party doesn't care whether you vote for it or not. Neither does the Republican Party. That's why we need to start electing people that actually care about serving instead of caring about how to exploit American citizens. The American imperative is more important than the Democrat or Republican imperative. The constitutional imperative outweighs all party politics. That is something we need in this nation. I hope we get it. Back with more in just a moment. I knew I was going to do that. This is the Wells Report. I'm John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. All right? This broadcast is independent. In other words, I built it, I do it every day, and I'm the one responsible for all the bills. There is no source of funding except you. As I've mentioned on this broadcast before, the one thing that kept me in broadcasting all these years were the people that listened or watched because I could always depend on them. Couldn't depend on management so much because they had some arcane ulterior garbage going on all the time, and I wasn't a part of that club. But I could always depend on you because for whatever reason, you find value in this. You find value in the broadcasting I do. And so this gives me an opportunity to lay it all out and say, if this show's good enough, it'll make it. I've done that before. It's been successful. Will it be again? I don't know. But it's going to require your support. Support me without spending a nickel. Give me a thumbs up. If you listen to this broadcast and you think it's worthy, thumbs up. Okay? Or pass it along to your friends. Just share it. Subscribe to it on whatever platform you spend any time with. If you're watching this broadcast on a platform like YouTube or Twitter or Twitch, what have you, then subscribe there. And if you'd like to throw some money at this broadcast, you most certainly can. And that can be done by going to patreon.com/The Wells Report. patreon.com/The Wells Report. Would be wonderful if you could do that. I would sincerely appreciate it, I promise. And let me do something real fast here. It only costs you like $1 a month. A month. $1 a month. $1 a month. Okay? So there you go. Let's get back to what we're talking about here. There are a couple of other things that I think you need to know about. We spent a little bit of time talking about these people in Arizona that are armed watching these drop boxes for ballots. And there was a lawsuit by the League of Women Voters in Arizona. A judge has issued a temporary restraining order keeping a group of armed poll watchers at least 250 feet from drop boxes. This after a string of complaints that voters felt intimidated by people carrying firearms as they monitored voting. And that's reasonable. Okay? Once again, if I was involved with the people that are actually watching the boxes, what would I be armed with? That's a quiz. That's a quiz. What would I be armed with? I've told you. I've told you what these people need to be armed with. What is it? Go ahead and put it in the chat room. Call me on the phone, 817-379-2172. Go ahead. That's right. That's exactly right. A copy of the Constitution and an American flag. And since I'm 250 feet away, probably a set of binoculars. Maybe a video camera with a telephoto lens. And a pocket Constitution. Exactly. You don't need a weapon. And oh, by the way, if you need a weapon, and yeah, the streets are mean and they're dangerous, then carry a concealed weapon, but don't brandish it in front of people. This is my AR-15, buddy. I'm watching for them damn guys that are out there trying to cheat the election. Stop it. You're playing right into their hands. Leftists are easy to outthink. Remember, they're stuck with there's political sociopaths. They're stuck with whatever it is that's lodged in their brain. Don't be so dumb that you fall for whatever they hang out there for you. Come on. Be smart. Anyway, so they got to stay 250 feet away from the ballot boxes. That's fine. All it takes is a nice camera and a good telephoto lens, and you'll be just fine. Okay? By the way, speaking of immigration hypocrisy, there are somewhere around 200,000 people coming to Texas every single day. Every single month. 200,000 people. They're coming to small towns on the border, Del Rio, El Paso. They're just showing up at these small little towns. And they're drowning in immigrants. Okay? And so what ends up happening is that New York is is actually saying, I've got a state of emergency here. Massachusetts is begging the Biden administration for more help with migrants. Well, welcome to what Texas and Florida and California and Arizona have been doing for decades, asking the American government for actual help. None came. So the states are doing it themselves. By the way, in case you're wondering, if you haven't heard this, pay attention. Governors Doug Ducey, Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, Canada is trying to figure out how to get 1.45 million immigrants into their country by 2025. Everybody that comes across the border, you're going to the Great White North, eh? Then you'll learn terms like backpicking. Oh, God. Holy God. That's been the Wells Report today. Thanks very much for watching. I sincerely appreciate it. Do me a favor and share it with your friends. See you tomorrow. And there we go. All right. The Wells Report in the can for another day. All right, beloveds. Tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to, thank you, man. Beer? Nah, I've been a cider guy for a long time. Cider. Love it. No, I think I'm going to probably just sit back with a dram of distillate spirits and enjoy my life. Actually, no, I'm going to Landon Winery. If you happen to be headed to Texas, if you're heading to Texas, stop in a little town called Grapevine, and in Grapevine, you'll find Landon Winery. And Landon Winery is my winery of choice. They have great wines, good people, wonderful atmosphere. And that's where I'm going. If you want to meet me there, I'll see you in Grapevine at Landon Winery. All right. So, by the way, Arthur, why don't you come to Texas? Try it on. Set a spell. Let's go to Landon Winery. The Texas wine industry saved the French wine industry, in case you're wondering. I'm just saying. So there would be no French wines without Texas wines. So we kind of sort of know what we're doing. Olivier, let's go to Landon Winery. You got nothing better to do. Fire up that Chevy pickup truck and I'll see you there, okay? Oh, that's Canadian for beer. What, back bacon? No. What? Okay, I got to go. I got 10 people watching. What are we going to do now? And I'm going to walk off in the middle. Okay. Listen, you guys, take good care. All right. Thanks for watching. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you find value in this show, man. It's spooky crazy out here in Independentville. It really is. So God bless all y'all.